I'm going to be trying to figure out how to get Facebook going, but you are one of our speakers. We've known each other a while. I remember the moment I met you. I'll say that in a minute.
Okay.
And it was on the telephone. But why don't you go ahead and tell people who you are and what's one of the
Yeah,
biggest
yeah.
things on your mind with parents of kids with struggling students as we enter this fall. And meanwhile, I'm going to be looking down.
Doing
Sorry,
some tech
everybody, when I'm
stuff.
trying to figure out this techie stuff on
Yeah,
neighborhood.
totally cool. So my name is Brendan Mahan. I'm the host of the ADHD Essentials podcast. I'm the creator of The Wall of Awful. I'm the writer of the book of The Wall of Awful, which is in process right now. I spoke with a
Congrats.
literary agent for the first time in my life on Friday. So hopefully that works out well. And I do ADHD work. I do parenting stuff, neurodiversity stuff, kind of the stuff, the things you would expect from a TIFOS person. And I think the challenge that I sort of bang the drum on the most when it comes to kids and school and in general is we are still feeling the echoes of COVID. And I just think it's important to honor that. I don't mean that as like a doom and gloom thing. I just mean it as when we as parents think about what we did as children and then we see what our kids are doing and we're like, this is not what I did. And so there must be something wrong. Well, we didn't live through a global pandemic, and we also didn't have these things, these phone things that kind of cause all kinds of stuff. We didn't have social media, we didn't have screens. So our kids are in a different world, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't encourage them to do the stuff that we did. It just means that they're going to do other things too. I know this summer I've been encouraging my kids to hang out with their friends and get on their bikes and go and live like an 80s kid, and they're finding
Is
it really difficult.
that the sentence that you say to them?
Sometimes, yeah.
I like
and,
that.
and and they find it really hard to do because their friends just aren't available or aren't around or don't know how to do that, right? Like they had a friend who was coming over a little while ago. This is last week. They kind of sent a group text inviting people over. One kid said he was going to come, and then no one else did, so that kid backed out. I'm sure because that kid was feeling self conscious about it, which is okay. Any kid that comes over to our house is outnumbered if there's only one of them because I have identical twins who are best friends. But they're also really friendly and really welcoming. And so my kids have been struggling to live like 80s kids. They've been spending a little more time on the phone than I would like, a little more time on screens. But my office is in my basement. So when I say go upstairs, I mean to my living room. When I go upstairs, my kids are sitting on the couch a lot of the time. But also, at least half of that time, they're reading a book or goofing on like making a D&D game or something. And when I encourage them to go and do yard work or bag comic books because we're selling comics at comic conventions or something like that, typically they do it, and it's because I ask them to. Um, but they're doing it right. One of the things that I encourage with my kids, one of the values that we sort of talk about as a family, and especially with the boys, is that people of worth create more than they consume. And and I will sort of nod to Seth Perler as an example of that. The guy who created TIFOS, right? That's no joke, the amount of undertaking that TIFOS is. And he is a person of worth, most certainly. And that's the thing I try to encourage with my kids, right? Like, let's make sure you're creating at least as much as you're consuming, and preferably more. And my kids are going to be sophomores in high school. It's a little easier for them. They have more skills. They can create, more because they have more skills in that area. Younger kids, it's going to be a little bit harder, but giving them that opportunity, finding the tools and resources that they might need to be able to create whatever it is. I define creation really loosely. If we contact friends to hang out, we're creating social bonds. If we go for a bike ride, we're creating stronger kids, we're creating adventure, we're creating lots of things that are not necessarily physically touchable and holdable. But it's a pretty good general rule and guideline that I use in my house.
Can I ask, as far as the groups that you've done over the years, and when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to back to school time, what sorts of things do they really respond to, and what do they do to set up for the fall?
A lot of it is systems. A lot of it is
Tell me
there's
about
sort of
that.
two. yeah, there's sort of two components to it. One is, what do we need homework to look like? What do we need chores to look like? What do we need self care to look like? And how is that going to be impacted by whatever my kid is doing after school? If my kid is in band, is that going to impact homework, which is then going to impact chores, which is then going to impact self care? I don't know. Because we get less and less time depending on how active our kids are with outside of school activities or after school activities. So that's one thing, is sort of creating that system, but it sometimes it takes a little while. School has to start first so we can really get a good idea of what the new rhythm is, because now my kid is in band and they weren't in band last year, or now my kid is taking taekwondo lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and what does that mean, because it happens at 7:30. Or maybe it's band and taekwondo. I don't know. But it takes a little bit of time to find the rhythm before we can lock in the system. Some parents struggle with that. They want the system to be locked in from day one, and
Mm.
they're less
So how
comfortable with
how
changing
do
it.
how do you
Mhm.
recommend that they do that then? Like after school starts, do they like do you recommend people have a formal meeting? Do they meet together in an accountability group with you to do it? Do they meet with their kids like once a week and like polish things up? Like what do you tend to
Yeah, I mean,
recommend?
it depends on the family. Some families can have the formal meetings. I do encourage parents to try to connect with their kids and their spouse at least over the weekend, right? Like Saturday or Sunday when things are probably calmer. Let's try to sit down and have a conversation in the early part of the school year. If we can maintain that all year long, great. If we can't, let's make sure we're at least having that happen in the beginning of the school year to get stuff nailed down and set expectations. And then if things go off the rails or are starting to go off the rails, let's have another meeting, even if we haven't had one in 2 weeks or 2 months or something. So meetings are important, having those conversations. And and some of that is, like I said in my presentation, right? Your kid's story is not your story. And that's the other big component to this, is helping parents get themselves in a spot where they're going to be less triggered, where they're going to be less emotionally dysregulated by their kids' struggles. And that's hard too, right? That we spend a lot of time in the parent groups navigating that, navigating the, like, it's okay that you hear your kids like feet coming down the stairs in the morning and you're filled with dread because something didn't happen last night, or something did happen and it wasn't okay and we have to navigate this relationship. Like, all that stuff's okay, but we still have to talk to our kids and we still have to have these negotiations and solve these problems. And the more we can make it so that we're on one side of the table sitting next to our kid and the problem is on the other side of the table, instead of we're on one side, our kid's on the other side of the table, and in the middle, on the top of the table, is the problem causing more strife between us. That's less useful. We want this to be a team effort between us and our kids. And that's exactly where those meetings come into play and why they're important.
And how do you set up routines for the fall with people?
Yeah, I am a big fan of automated routines. I'm a big fan of like Alexa reminders and phone alarms and whatever you can do to get the stimulus to outside of my need to remember it, my need for my kids to remember it. The more I can set up stuff that's going to be reminding me externally, and my two favorites are the phone and Alexa, or whatever little dot in home thing you have, because they talk to you, because they make noise, because they stop. They're not just there. They don't fall into the background as readily. They can eventually, but not as easily. And also because it empowers kids, right? If your kid doesn't have a cell phone, they're not going to set a reminder on their phone. But if you have an Alexa or a Google Home or something, they can set reminders in that. And now they're taking the initiative, they're taking the responsibility, they're taking accountability. That's awesome. That's great stuff. And if it doesn't work, we'll tweak it. Like, that matters too. But giving them the opportunity to kind of do some of the systematizing on their own is pretty useful.
And then this year at TIFOS, you and I, so Brendan's one of our speakers this year, and we did not talk about the wall of awful. And it's such a useful model. So for parents who are watching right now who don't know what the wall of awful is, can you give us a rundown of what it is? Because it's just such a useful model to keep in
Yeah,
mind.
thank you. So the wall of awful is my model for the emotional impact of repeated failure that comes with executive functioning challenges. That said, everybody has a wall of awful, not just people with ADHD or autism or something. Um, but it's especially significant when it comes to folks who have executive function challenges. The main idea is every time we fail, we get a brick in our wall, right? So I failed at something, I get a failure brick. Along with that failure brick, I get a disappointment brick because I disappointed myself. But I've also disappointed my mom, my dad, my teacher, my boss, my spouse if I'm an adult, right? And along with disappointing people, I feel like they might reject me. So now I got a rejection brick, right? So I've got these rejection bricks, these disappointment bricks, this failure brick, and they keep coming, right? I feel guilty that I messed this thing up. So now I have a guilt brick. And if I can't figure out the difference between whether I'm the mistake or I made a mistake, right? Guilt is I feel like I made a mistake. Shame is I feel like I am the mistake. And if I have trouble piecing those apart, I'm starting to get big blocks of shame. And that can be tricky if you've got ADHD and you're like, oh, I made this mistake because I have ADHD. Doesn't that mean I'm the mistake? No, no, it doesn't. It's easy to make that like conflate the two, but that's not what's up. You made the mistake because you had ADHD, and you're allowed to make that mistake if you have ADHD. In the same way that if I have trouble breathing, right, me who has asthma, I don't start feeling terrible and go, oh, I'm just too lazy and unmotivated to breathe. Like, why am I so lazy about breathing? No, I have asthma. So if I double book myself or I have trouble starting the project I'm trying to work on or I just like lose track of time, well, that's supposed to happen too because I have ADHD. So just like I don't beat myself up too much about my breathing issues that happen on occasion, I also don't beat myself up too much about the ADHD stuff that flares up. And that's how I personally break apart the guilt and the shame. And other stuff too, right? Loneliness and uncertainty and fear and these things all come into the wall as well. And then there's 5 ways people try to get past it. 2 don't work. 1 works, but is not that great and can damage stuff, do some damage. And then 2 are pretty good. So the 2 that
And
don't
then let's
work,
go through that, and then
yep,
we'll wrap up for everybody
sure thing,
today.
sure
And
thing.
this is perfect because and
Yeah,
if you like to take notes, this is, I think, a really good place to take notes. Well,
sure.
especially when we talk about what works. Go for it.
And so the ways that don't work are staring at it and going around it, right? If I'm staring at my wall, I'm not really engaging with those emotions. I'm not really doing anything to move past it. And if I decide to go around it, really I'm just going to end up doing something else. I'm not really going around it. That's not going to happen. It's a metaphor and it's infinitely wide. I know because I made it up. Like you're not going around this wall. You're just going to get distracted and do something else. And then the way that works, but is not always great, is to like smash through the wall, right? We use our frustration, we use our anger, we use our anxiety, and we power through this emotional barrier with some more active, strong emotions. But that can lead to us yelling at the person who asked us to do our homework. That can lead to us beating ourselves up. Why do I stink? What's wrong with me? We're damaging relationships with that option. Not always, but most of the time, unless we're pretty skilled at doing this and regulating those emotions. Those 3, by the way, are fight, flight, and freeze. So fight is smash, flight is go around it, freeze is stare at it. The 2 that work to get past it that are good and healthy are climbing it, which basically means processing those emotions, recognizing things, doing some acceptance, coming to terms with what I have to do, and putting a door in it, which is about changing my emotional state. So that might be listening to music or working with a buddy or even making a plan and having a plan can change our emotional state pretty effectively.
And then do you look at it as like over time the bricks come off the wall of awful or shrinks or it becomes replaced with other bricks? Like how do you
I get asked that question a lot. People
yeah,
always want the walls to come out, and I'm like, no. Um,
tell us why.
here's so my view is it's not that the walls come out, it's that you become a stronger climber. It's that
Hmm.
you get better at climbing, right? So what used to be a wall, you're stepping over it like it's nothing because you're so much stronger now. And the reason that I'm hesitant to say, well, yeah, because you took the bricks out of the wall, is because if you have something happen in your life that causes some setbacks or causes significant anxiety or just is disruptive, you might find that suddenly you're struggling with stuff that you didn't struggle with like for the past 5 years. You had this on lock and then something happened and now it's hard again. So rather than have you be upset at yourself for, oh, my wall came back, I'd rather people are able to go, oh, no, this makes sense that I'm not as strong of a climber right now because I lost someone I cared about, or I just had to start a new job or a new position at my job and everything's a lot harder right now, or I just had a really significant health issue. And like, I'd rather someone is looking at it with that lens, that
Hmm.
we're giving ourselves some compassion for the climb being harder, because right now we're a little weakened and we'll get strong again. We'll build that strength back up, and it'll be nothing to get over this wall again in a month or two. But right now it's hard, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's very realistic. One of our speakers, Sonali. Do you know Sonali?
Hmm.
She talks about like that's an important part of you. And I like there's a lot of misleading stuff in the ADHD executive function world. We're really in the coaching world in general that makes it seem like, there's a simple, easy way, like eliminate procrastination, overcome overwhelm, or overcome like to overcome the wall of awful or to overcome procrastination or things like this. And it's like really, it's not about like overcoming or completely like these are important parts of us. It's not about
Yeah.
eliminating blah blah and be motivated. And it's so misleading to think, oh my gosh, well, we can then become like perfect. And I think that's even
Right.
more pressure on kids for their wall of awful. It's just
Yeah. I
about growth
I
and it's
have to
about a
say,
dance. I like to think of it like
yeah,
that. But go ahead, go
I
ahead.
just got to throw this out there that the title of the book, hopefully, is Overcoming the Wall of Awful. And it's overcoming on purpose. It's not overcome, like, because you keep doing it over and over and over again.
Process.
It's perpetually in the present tense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a process, and and as adults, we all probably have some of the same dysfunctional patterns that we had as kids.
Huh,
We just work with it better. We dance with it
huh.
better. Um, it's just we've got a toolbox that we know how to use.
Right.
It's not like difficult things don't stop happening. They do continue. Our kids will always have challenges, but they will know how to work with them in great ways rather than being ruled by them or overcome by them or it like taking over their entire life or their entire mental health or their emotional health or their relationships instead so they can actually like work with these things. And that's all right, my friend. We're gonna
All right.
wrap up. Give me
Cool.
your final thought, and we'll wrap it up. And by the way,
Yeah.
my name's Seth Perler. Thanks for being here. We're at a thing called TIFOS, the Executive Function Online Summit for Compassionate Proactive Parents, Teachers, Therapists, people who are there to support kids with executive function challenges. Today is our last day, or is day 3 of our group of experts. Dive in if you haven't. Today's awesome. Tomorrow we'll have all the experts. I think there are 42. You can dive in, catch up on any you missed. But
Mhm.
please share it, executivefunctionsummit.com, with people right now. Like grab the link and share it around so more people can find us. So I did not, I don't even know if I mentioned that because my brain's pretty tired this weekend, Brendan.
Yeah. And I'm,
So
I'm
yeah,
going to give people a specific idea on who to share this with. We're talking
perfect.
about how school is starting, right? Share this with the teachers that are you are connecting with.
Hmm.
Let them know this thing exists, right? Because we're happening a little bit on the line for school, right? So if you're seeing teachers, let them know. I know I happen to be connected to a bunch of them, so I've had a few of them share to their audience, or not their audiences, but their friends and peers and coworkers. But the principal that you're talking to, the special education teacher that you're talking to as you work to transition back into school, let them know this event exists so they can tune into it.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah, we have a lot of teachers who come to TFOS. All right, so what's your final thought for families as we wrap up the call?
Yeah, my final thought is that, like, this is a problem to solve, whatever it is, right? It's just a problem to solve, and we are capable, you are capable, you can solve this problem. You have more resources and skills than you maybe realize. So once you think you have a solution, maybe think if there's another one, which doesn't mean you don't use the first one. It just means you're practicing problem solving, because this stuff is not insurmountable. And all of the experts who are here at TIFOS are here to help you get over whatever the challenges are that you're facing, whether it's a wall of awful or a mountain of paperwork. You can do this, and we're on your side.
Right on, Brendan. You can do this. I like that. Yeah, yeah, and it's not quick and easy, but it's
Nope.
doable. It's doable. So, all right, parents, thanks all for being here. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.